Welcome to the CEO series. Our guest today is Orlando Ashford, former CEO Holland American Cruises, author, and consultant. Our topic today is going to be careers, tools and rules to help maximize the career journey. Orlando most recently served as president of Holland American Lines, leading the award-winning cruise brand and business, including a fleet of 14 premium vehicles over 7 continents. He oversaw sales and marketing, revenue management, deployment, itinerary planning, the whole schmeal. Prior to joining Holland American, Orlando was president of talent business segments for Mercer. Prior to that, he was the Director of Human Resources, Eurasia, Africa for Coca-Cola, and Vice President of Corporate Center, Human Resources, Cultural Transformation. And I think that was located in Istanbul, if I'm not mistaken. Prior to that role, he was Vice President of Global Human Resource Strategy and Org Development for Motorola. Quite a career. Orlando, glad to have you here.
Hey, good to be here with you. Appreciate it.
And welcome to the CEO series. So glad you accepted our invite to come on. You've had such an illustrious career. I mean, just reading through that, it probably would have taken me a couple of minutes to get through all of it, but we had to cut it brief. You were an author, you were CEO, head of human resources. You've basically done it all. So your career journey basically propel you to the top of the org chart. Not often do we get there. Tell us about that journey and how that figured into your transformation from starting out of college to that level.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I've been fortunate. You know, I have great parents. I've had some great friends and mentors along the way. We can talk about that. But one of the critical things that happened for me was I got exposed to corporate America relatively young. I grew up in the East Coast in New Jersey, and they had a program at my school called the Summer Technical Education Program. And they identified like 20 of us, and they taught us computer programming in the summers.
Okay.
And so C++ and BASIC, which are ancient languages now, but at the time, those were the things. And so by the time I was a sophomore in high school, they had offered me an internship. So 14 years old, I was working at Bell Labs, AT&T as an intern. And so, and I did 3 interns, sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school. So by the time I got to college, I had already had 3 internships. And that honestly was the biggest accelerator of my career, getting a chance to debunk the myth of corporate America and those big buildings. I got a chance to work inside them at a pretty young age and got unscared, I guess.
Okay, that was cool. Exposure at such an early age, that kind of created a foundation to take it to the next level. So what happened after when you went away to college, and walk us through that portion of it?
Sure. So I was, as I mentioned, I was doing computer programming and was sort of in the technical space. So I went to Purdue to study engineering. So I figured I'd leverage my math and science background. But I quickly learned that engineering was not my passion. And so a lot of us have this challenge or opportunity. Again, my parents were pushing me. And so I had 3 choices growing up. I could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And so I was at Purdue studying engineering, and there was a very small program there called Organizational Leadership. There was only 90 students in it at the time, but it was studying organization dynamics, leadership, org effectiveness, those types of things. And from my internships, I recognized some of the patterns that were being discussed in that program and realized that it wasn't engineering products that I was interested in. I was interested in engineering organizations, which is what this major was.
Okay.
So I came home my freshman year to talk to my parents about changing my major from industrial engineering to organizational leadership. And my father promptly replied, well, I won't say what he replied, but he wasn't
I know where this is going.
He wasn't supportive of the idea because engineering was a great major. I was at a great institution for that. And I was on half scholarship. I was paying a quarter and my parents were paying the other quarter.
Yeah.
And so the deal was, as long as we are helping pay for school, we insist that you pursue your engineering degree.
Okay.
So I'll finish the story. So 3.5 years into my industrial engineering degree at Purdue University, I got hired as a residence hall assistant. And as a residence hall assistant, I am now in full financial control of my college because I'm able to pay for it. And the day I got the job, I changed my major to organizational leadership.
You did your own thing.
I did my own thing. My dad was not happy for a while, but as we talk about the rest of the career journey, about 6-7 years in, he kind of got on board and said, I guess maybe you know what you're doing with this stuff as things have progressed.
Yeah. So you've written 2 books. Your new book was coming out soon?
Next month, I hope. Well, it's with the publisher now. We're putting the final edits on it. My first book was called Talentism, and it was based on a study of the role that technology plays in connecting people to jobs and jobs to people. And my most recent book is called How'd You Get That Job?
Yeah, and I saw that.
Yeah, well, and that because that's the question I've been asked my whole career. And so I've been very fortunate that people have seen things in me, presented me with opportunities, whether it was to be a consultant, whether it was to move to Istanbul, or whether it was to be the head of HR for a major corporation or to run second oldest cruise line in the world. So I've had wonderful opportunities presented in front of me. And then I've been on the other side, ready to walk through those opportunities because there was some risk associated with each of those. And so people have always asked me, well, gee, how did you get that job? Because it wasn't always logical how I ended up where I ended up. And so I pulled all those different tidbits together in a book to try to explain the way I've approached my career in the hopes that I will be helpful to others.
Okay. Because the last time we were together was 6th Avenue in New York City. And this was back mid-2000 or something like that. And next thing I heard, this in Orlando now is the president of Holland American Cruise. I'm like,
how'd that
happen? So that was the impetus for the book. How did you get that job? What are some key learnings from that book? Frameworks from that book?
Sure. So a couple things. I talk about first having a vision, painting a picture in your mind. How do you see your career? How do you see your life? How do you see things playing out? And then building into that. So I tell a story in the book. Some of you may be old enough to remember a show in the U.S. called LA Law. And in that Blair Underwood plays this sort of young, brash lawyer. And I remember watching that show and actually envisioning myself similar to that. He was African-American, he was young, he had the suits, he had a briefcase, he was powerful, his words had value. And so I knew that was something I wanted to do. I ended up not becoming a lawyer, but becoming a consultant. But that was the image, the vision that I had early on. And so growing into your vision is one of the things I talk about. The second point that I talk about, and this is most important, is having a reputation for delivering results. No matter what you plan to do, if you don't deliver results, if you don't get it done, doesn't matter. Anything else, I say it in the book. This is the shortest chapter, but the most important chapter. You've got to get it done. Otherwise, none of the other things will matter. I also talk about brand. You just said the word. What's your brand? And what are the investments that you're making to build your brand? Whether it's speaking, book writing, article writing, presenting, doing well at work, your philanthropic things, all of those things come together to build a brand so when people say, well, gee, what's Ron like? What is it that they say? Are you influencing intentionally? Yeah. The other thing I talk about is this concept of, I call your career community. Who are those people around you that you tap into to help influence the decisions that you make in managing your career? I like to talk about having a personal board of directors. So who are those 6, 7, 8, 10 people that pour into your career, will give you unfiltered, honest feedback as you work through major decisions? Who are those mentors? Who are those sponsors that help you? I also give some tips on how to leverage recruiters. I actually think the recruiter community is an untapped community. Oftentimes people wait until they need a job to respond to the recruiter. You should be responding to recruiters all the time, even when you're not interested in a job. One, to know your market worth. One, to understand what's happening in the market, to get people to assess your capabilities, to tell you if you're underjobbed or overjobbed. And so you can build strategies for what you want to do inside your company or outside your company if you're ready to make a move.
Brand awareness. When you talked about recruiters, you're right, because in the need, I need to reach out to a recruiter, and I've never built a relationship. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, because they look at LinkedIn. I can send a note and right away I can get a meeting with someone. Building that relationship. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are recruiters that I've been working with or connected to for over 20 years, even though I'm at a position where maybe they couldn't even help me directly. Here's the thing most people don't think about. When every interaction you have or don't have with a recruiter is tracked. So imagine when you first got out of college and that recruiter called you and you were happy in your job and you kind of hung up the phone on them abruptly or rude or quick with them, that goes into your file.
That's right.
The time that you then called because you needed something, that goes into your file. I don't know if you have any friends in the search business, ask them to look at your file and you'll see 10, 15, 20 years of records of interactions with you, good or bad. So we were talking about brand before. Here's a perfect example of a small, simple way to feed into your brand. If you have no relationship with the recruiter and then you're looking for a job, guess what? You're at the bottom of the list. They'll take your name, they'll write it down, they'll put you in the mix, but you're not the one that they sell. The one that they sell to that client is the one that they know. I've known Orlando for 12 years. When I call him, he helps me, he shares, he gives me names, blah, blah, blah. And then when you need them, it's when they'll show up for you.
Yeah. So my metaphor for that is making deposits every day. It's kind of like going to the bank every day, making a deposit. So whenever I need a withdrawal, I'm never going to be insufficient. So that's kind of the same way of looking at that. So you talk in your book about calculated risk. And I kind of get my sense of what that's about. Can you kind of walk us through calculated risk as it relates to career vision?
Sure. I mean, so I can personalize a couple times. So Istanbul, you mentioned Istanbul. So when I was presented with an opportunity, I was working at Coca-Cola. I wanted an international assignment. I was presented with an opportunity to move to Istanbul to help lead the creation of the Eurasia group. And I had not been to Turkey, was not familiar with it. And so I had some natural apprehension, but I thought about it. So what's the worst case scenario? And so that's how I assess calculated risk. So if I go to Turkey and I hate it, well, I'll just move back, right? So it'll be an experience. I'll know this wasn't for me, too big a stretch, too uncomfortable. I'll just move back. But if I go and I enjoy it, it can open up a whole bunch of different doors. And so that's the way I've always taken all these different, what's the worst case scenario? If I can live with the worst case scenario and the upside for taking that opportunity. The other one, leaving out of HR to go run a P&L. Well, so not a lot of CHROs are presented with that opportunity. I went to some of my mentors, some of the people on my personal board of directors and said, what do you think about this? I said, well, Orlando, not a lot of CHROs get the chance to run a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. One. Two, if you go and you hate it, you can always go back into HR and you'll just be a better HR leader, one that has run a business. And if you go and you enjoy it, it will open up all kinds of doors, which is exactly what I'm dealing with now. I've got opportunities in spaces and places that would not have happened 5 or 6 years ago had I not gone down this path.
Wow. So possibly next time we talk, you will be in the Wall Street Journal making a big announcement someplace.
We'll see.
We'll see how that goes, right? So what advice would you offer to executives? Because in this region, the Middle East, a lot of executives have lost out because of COVID. And people are trying to figure out what's next step. So we talked about calculated risk, looking at it that way. That if I can't even get my foot in the door, how can I increase value, brand value, whatever you want to call it to?
Yeah. So here's how I think about it. So in the book, I talk about this concept of playing multiple chessboards. So when you're in a role or a job, that's one chessboard. And the company wants you to be all in on that one game of chess. I've always believed that I should have 2 or 3 different chess games going on at the same time. I may spend more time on one board, and make more moves on this board. But I always pick my head up, look at my other board, slide a piece. And I always look up on my other board and go over here and slide a piece. And that could mean things like speaking engagements. That could be writing a book. That could be investing in relationship with recruiters. That could be my philanthropic endeavors. That could be providing advice and counsel to small businesses. Any number of things, depending on what your primary interests are and some of those second and third and fourth interests that you have. It does two things. So one, it gives you options, because there could be something that materializes on that chessboard 2 or chessboard 3 that starts to become interesting, and you could maybe jump over to that board, make that your primary board. 2, I actually think it gives you power in the primary board that you're playing. Mm-hmm. So I've always been able to stand firm on my beliefs, on things that I thought were right, because I knew if things blew up on this one board, I had 2 other boards that I could go to. Yeah. So I never had to sell myself out or trade off on my values, even though there were times when people tried to get me to do that. Never had to feel any pressure to do that. So look, I like it here. I enjoy this job, but I'm not completely beholden to this job because I've got other chessboards that I have in play.
Yeah. So my metaphor for that is career 2.0, 3.0. You know,
Mm-hmm.
my father had a saying. Your father sounds a lot like my father, first of all.
Yeah.
He says, you always keep your eye on a crack. You know, you see what's going on around you as opposed to just being focused directly what's in front of you. And one of the things you mentioned about the, speaking opportunities, I left New York City and I moved to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And one of the things that propelled me in kind of this new space I'm in was speaking opportunities. I took advantage of everyone that came, and I basically traveled all over the world giving speeches. That led to someone sitting in one of the audiences and hearing me speak and offered me an opportunity to represent me as a speaker. Mm-hmm. So I know that lots of times executives may want to shy away from that. But again, it goes back to, wouldn't that fall into going back to trying to increase the brand outside of the space you're in?
Absolutely. I mean, those two things go together. So you have to be intentional and purposeful in your brand. So the question that you want to manage is, what do people say about me? Mm. And if you're not clear, well, then there's something you need to work on. Orlando is blank, blank, blank. And so you should have a thought around a vision around what you want people to say. And then if that is not true, what are the things that you can do to help make that true? Write a book about things you want them to think is true about you. Go speak about things that you want them to think is true about you. Make sure you deliver results wherever it is that you are working, so that people have that sense about you. All of those things play into your brand, your reputation, and ultimately how you can cash in on it in terms of role and job and career. Okay,
this is your second book.
Yep.
So why did you write the first one? What started the author kind of approach? I know you mentioned the chessboards and that.
Yeah. So the first book was really, I wrote it for my previous employer. So when I was working at Mercer, and so I apologize, I'm in the airport if you can hear that in the background.
It's okay.
I was developing a point of view on the way people get connected to jobs and jobs to people, and the role that technology is playing in that space. And the fact that people need to pay attention to these tools that are being built, because they're being built under the promise that they're a better predictor of job fit. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I also warn people, particularly people of color and people of difference, is that the same biases that exist in humans are being coded into these computers.
Exactly.
And so we have to pay attention the way we're going to be positioned for jobs. Take this test, play this game, look at this video, and then it's going to spit out who's the best person. Mm-hmm. Well, the same biases that exist in humans are being programmed into these very machines. And so as I was learning about that, I just felt compelled to write a book to frame that issue. And then the second book, it's really just because I give a lot of career advice to young people and middle career people. And I have these different stories that I tell and these different sort of rules and tools, as I call it. And people said, Orlando, you just put this down on paper. And so the thought is I could just help more people by writing it down in the book.
Okay. And you said that book will be out next week?
It'll be like toward the end of September. I'm literally, we're putting the final touches on it. I'm getting it back from the editor and all that good stuff. So my editor told me on Friday we should have it ready to go in about 3 weeks.
Okay, cool. We'll be on the lookout for it. And the title of that book again is Did You Get That Job? So remember that.
How did you get that job? How did you get that job, by the way?
Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty easy one to remember, you know?
Yeah.
So for executives, aspiring executives across the globe, I'm going to say title driven, because lots of times people aren't title driven, but they're career driven. Mm-hmm. And that could just be in their passion. What kind of advice would you give someone who's striving to move to the next step, whatever that step may be?
Yeah, so I think you want to pull all these levers that we've been talking about here for the last little, right? So you want to have a vision. What does that vision look like? And I agree with you. It's less about title, but more about position and posture. I want to be a person of influence. I want people to pay attention to my words. I want my words to have value. I want to be influential, whatever that is. And then try to paint pictures around that. I tell people to pay attention to people that are in the roles that you aspire to. When I was in college and they would have speakers come on Friday, I went religiously to go hear those people speak. And then the ones that I resonated with, based on their style, their tone, their look, their background, I glommed onto some of those people. I wrote them. And some of those folks, actually, one of my mentors today, I met at one of those speeches. He's about 10 years older than me. He came back to Purdue to speak. His name's Sean Taylor. And I went up to him afterward. I said, man, I need to meet you. And I need you to give me some advice. And so we've been friends now 20 plus years. And so he still mentors me. And now I'm in a position in life I can mentor him.
Wow.
And we mentor each other. So I think tapping into the information and the insights around you so that you can be clear about how to best position yourself for what it is that you want to do in the next step, the next level.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to touch on LinkedIn, because that's the premier career site. And I see so many people that fail to use that in any way. And that's kind of a first step on branding. Executive search firms, that's their Facebook, so to speak. They're in it every day. What kind of advice would you give someone who has not really paid attention to their profile or their brand online?
Yeah, I'll give a personal example. I have a very good friend, very close friend, who's extremely talented in the HR space. And I've always pushed him. I said, you're 2 heads down. Yes, you have to. He's killing to deliver results.
Yeah.
Which is great, which you have to do. So I don't want to underplay that. You absolutely have to deliver results, but you have to stick your head up and play these other chessboards. You got to slide a piece here and here. And LinkedIn is one of those wonderful places to efficiently work on your brand and play those other chessboards. You can write an article and post it. You can, tag an article that you think has some merit or is powerful, and then post ways to give people insights into terms of the type of person that you are. And so I think it's a very effective platform to build, work on, and influence your brand. And you can put a little time into it. You can just like something that send a good message, or get into some groups that send a message for where you want to play, or you can invest some heavy time and actually write some pieces. I just wrote an article in relation to what's going on in the world around George Floyd. And I challenge the world to think about maybe what we're seeing is an extinction burst as it relates to extreme racism. And I just raised the question. And so, and talk about some things that need to happen. And I posted it. So people that want to get some insight in terms of the type of person and executive Orlando Ashford is, well, you'll see my article on my LinkedIn account, and it'll tell you that not only am I an executive, but I also have some things that I'm socially conscious about. That's just me.
Cool.
Everyone wants to think about that as it relates to that.
Yeah. That took me back, because the CEO for Kaiser Permanente, the pharmaceutical drug company, wrote an article, and this was 5 or 6 murders back.
Yeah, Bernard Tyson you're talking about.
Bernard Tyson. And
Yep.
I kind of stayed away from writing that kind of thing because I write a lot. When I saw it, I said, you know what, I can't. And so I wrote an article and posted it on a site in US back during that time because I had to address it. I can address everything else. I can talk about all these other things that's happening, but here's something right in my backyard that I was a little timid in moving out and sharing that, my innermost thoughts. Yeah.
I think, and we've all been there. I actually talk about that in the book, because this balance between trying to fit an image, make people comfortable so you can be successful, but also being true to yourself, your personal trail, and showing up as yourself. When I was, I told this in a speech I gave when I was younger. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up on hip hop, right? So I'm a hip hop kid. And so when I would drive into work, I'd have the windows down in the summer, and I'd be, bobbing my head something that I like, exactly, De La Soul or something like that. And when I would get close to the office, I would turn it down and I'd switch to jazz. Now, I like jazz too. I like hip hop better.
Yeah.
But I think at that point in my life and my career, I didn't know how people were reading me, so I wanted to display an image that felt more corporate. Now, one of the things that I really admired about Bernard, because he was one of my mentors, was that he was true to himself. So so even as CEO of Kaiser Permanente, he was still going to hip hop concerts, even though his security team didn't like it.
Yeah, he was hanging out.
He still go to it because he's like me. We're similar ages. He grew up on that music. That's what he liked. So Lil Wayne was in town. He wanted to go see him.
Yeah,
good. So being true to himself, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I still remember the article he wrote, and he said, when I take this suit off and I'm riding around on the weekend in my normal weekend clothes, I could be this person. I forget now who it was. And that was the impetus for me to say, you know what, I've got to step out and do something. But I understand the transformation. And anyone else, lots of people on the call would not understand what you go through because they see us through one lens.
Sure.
But on the personal side, they don't understand what we would go through at any given point in time. And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. And because you try not to overwear it. You try not to bring it into the office. You try not to be burdensome or a downer, but it is real. It's part of your personal trail that you come into work with. So,
So CEO, now you're transitioning into this new chapter, board membership. Let's talk a little about board memberships and what you would bring to the table as a member of a board of directors, because I noticed online there's a lot of movement in board of directors for people that look like us.
Yeah. So I was fortunate. I got my first board seat 42. I was also fortunate. And what I tell people is own your genius, own your area of expertise. Because when the right board opportunity pops, then you will be uniquely qualified, as opposed to trying to morph yourself to fit every single board opportunity. So for me, the board, I'm on the ITT board. And when that opportunity presented itself, they were looking for somebody with an HR background. They were looking for somebody that had lived and worked internationally. They were looking for somebody that was young enough to serve on the board for a full 10 years.
Okay. And
diversity was a plus. Well, I popped. I was an HR person. I'd lived in Istanbul. I was 42, so I could serve 10 years easily. Yeah. In fact, we're getting close to that. And I was diverse. And so I was competing against one or two other people that was a valuable lesson. So own your expertise. And it's funny because when I went to my first board meeting, I'm there with a bunch of ex-CEOs and CFOs. And so I felt pressure to do my best CEO imitation. And I was not a CEO at the time. And, that lasted about 2 meetings. They're like, look, we didn't bring you here for that. We got a bunch of CEOs here. We need you for your expertise.
Okay. The people side.
The people side and the international side. So own that. And I grew into that over time. Now I've been able to augment that because I've since gotten into the P&L world. But I tell people, own your expertise and those board positions will pop. Yes, there is a lot of opportunity being created for women. And now people of color as boards look to diversify. So this is a wonderful opportunity. And I say for those that get into those positions, do not waste them. Okay. And what I mean by that is if you end up on a board, you are in a position of influence. Do not waste that influence. You should be able to push into that organization and create opportunities for others on the board and in the organization that you are now governing.
Okay. Okay. So bring others along.
Absolutely. Otherwise, what's the benefit? What's the benefit?
Well, the benefit would be just for you and yours without reaching back. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But the whole intention behind this push and saying we need to diversify the board is because the board should hold the companies accountable for diversifying the organization, diversifying the supply chain, diversifying the customer base, all of that stuff. And that starts with the board. And if you sit on that board and don't own your diversity and have influence, then it's a wasted space.
Okay. So diversity and inclusion, big topic in US today. Back here a few weeks ago, every time you picked up a news article, it was some company espousing their views on diversity. They're going to do better, da-da. I tend to look at it one way. What are your views on it?
Yeah, I mean, so look, it's all in how you look at it. There's a lot that's a lot better, right? Yeah. If I compare the options that my father had to the options that I have, things have evolved quite a bit. You know, my dad worked for the government for 33 years. I've been able to move between different companies. And I know my father would be like, you're changing jobs. That last job was great. I said, no, Dad, I had a better opportunity. But we grew up in different times, right? Yeah. So there's a lot that's evolved in the world from a diversity perspective. Yet there's a lot that's still the same. You know, we talked about the article that you were referring to, the one I wrote about what's going on with George Floyd, and we just had an incident with in Wisconsin with another young man being shot in the back. And so while we've made major strides around the world, there's still a lot of tension and debate and conflict between various groups. No matter where you are in the world, there's some group that's in conflict with another group out into the workplace. So we have to do better. What I do think is encouraging is that we're having a dialogue, more open, honest dialogue, more so than we've ever had, that I've ever seen. And so we're having conversations about how we feel. You're writing an article that you wouldn't have written. I'm writing articles that maybe I wouldn't have written. Yeah. And so I'm sharing my personal trail and my point of view. If we can get into an environment where we all can openly share our perspective, doesn't mean we'll all agree, but I can hear you and understand where you're coming from, and you can hear me, and we can have some mutual respect on those points of similarity and those points of difference, then we're starting to maybe build something. I will say one of the points in my career that was most beautiful in this regard was when I worked for Coca-Cola in Istanbul. I was managing, Eurasia and Africa from an HR perspective. So on my HR leadership team, I had Russians, I had Turks, I had Indians, I had Africans, a true melting pot of people. And so I used to love our team meetings. In fact, we hosted my first team meeting in Dubai. And we actually, as a team building, we went to Ski Dubai to ski down the mountain.
Yeah,
and I remember
Mall of the Emirates.
Yeah, exactly. You're outside in a silk shirt, and then within 15 minutes, you're bundled up on this hill inside of a mall, skiing, and with people. Some had skied and some hadn't skied, but we were having just some of the most beautiful types of cultural engagement that I've ever experienced in my life. Yeah. And that's what the world needs.
Well, you mentioned Dubai, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the environment here. Companies will talk about the number of nationalities, the number of languages that are spoken. They really value diversity, and don't try and keep it as a hidden thing. And you look at the executive teams of these organizations, and they're not going through the mix and match and all looks one way. But you can always find, or you can always tell the ones that are totally tone deaf, and they put up these ads. And you say, "What was the marketing team when that came about?" So
Right.
yeah. So I mean, all these things work. And when you think, when you just mentioned the fact that being on the board and bringing that diversity and inclusion and being able to wear that comfortably and being able to climb the ladder, over a period of years, and the advice you gave was so much on point. So I really, really appreciate you being a part of this today. I know you've got a flight. I see the flights going behind your head there. I know you got a flight. So you're located now. You're in Seattle now, right?
I live in Seattle. Been here the last 5.5, going on 6 years.
Okay.
And I'm, as you've alluded to, I'm writing my next chapter. It's part of the reason why I'm getting on this flight. And so I may have something to announce here in a few weeks. We'll see how we do.
Okay, cool. Let us know, man. And so congratulations. And you and I will be talking probably next week. I'll send you a note. We catch up again. But it was a pleasure. Thank you for squeezing us in, even though you're sitting in the airport now. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay.